Have you ever noticed that the world is changing? Do you know what is happening in our ocean? In this video, you will understand what is coral and the effects that cause coral bleaching, and how does it affect hospitality industry. By the end of this video, we will provide some suggestions on how hotels should contribute and save the coral reef. Our main actor, Senichi, is visiting Raja Ampat. Located in Indonesia, Raja Ampat is known as the Amazon of the ocean that contains Indonesia's largest marine park with around 40,000 km² of land and sea. Located in the center of the Coral Triangle, Raja Ampat is the home to the richest marine biodiversity on Earth, and 75% of the world coral species can be found here. Before going deep into this video, we need to understand what exactly is coral. This is a definition from Oxford English Dictionary, but we would like to elaborate this definition further according to National Ocean Service 2018. Coral are made up of tiny animals called polyps, distant cousin of jellyfish. Thousands of polyps which is surrounded by tentacles can make up a coral. Inside most of the polyps are tiny algae called zooxanthellae, and they photosynthesize and produce up to 95% of the food needed by the coral. Coral reef has been identified as an endangered ecosystem as they are one of the most sensitive ecosystems to the global climate change in the world. Coral can be divided into two main groups, which are hard and soft coral. Soft coral are flexible because they are lacking a solid skeleton, which they are often mistaken as plants. This picture shown is Capnella, which is an example of soft coral. Hard coral are building and expanding themselves with limestone, which is calcium carbonate, that will eventually become rocks. This is an example of hard coral, which is called Lunetia, and this is also the common type of coral that is generally known. After seeing the amazing coral reef in Raja Ampat, it reminds him of the beautiful coral in the Great Barrier Reef in Australia when he was traveling with his parents 30 years ago. Therefore, he decided to revisit the Great Barrier Reef in Australia. However, when he was diving, he was so shocked that everything has changed and most of the coral has turned completely white. Therefore, he started researching why the coral are turning completely white and what are the causes of that. There are 4 stages in the coral's life, which is healthy, stressed, bleached, and dead. For the first stage, when the coral are healthy, they have symbiotic relationship with microscopic algae called zooxanthellae that lives in their tissue. These algae are the coral primary food source and give them the color. For the next stage, stressed coral. This is because the symbiotic relationship becomes stressed due to the increasing ocean temperature and pollution. It results in the algae leaving the coral tissue. After the algae completely left the coral loses its major source of food and nutrients. They turn white or very pale, which makes them more prone to disease and likely to die.
There are 3 main causes of coral bleaching: pollution, climate change and global warming, and overfishing. In this video, we will highlight the main cause, which is climate change and global warming. Climate change is a global phenomenon created mainly by burning fossil fuels and cause extreme weather events such as mega typhoon. Meanwhile, global warming refers to the upward temperature trend across the entire Earth since late 1970s due to the increase in fossil fuel emissions since the Industrial Revolution. When fossil fuels are burned, carbon dioxide or CO2 is released in the atmosphere. The large-scale use of fossil fuels in the world economy causes the accumulation of CO2 in the atmosphere, becoming one of the main causes of global warming. The rise in livestock production also contributes to global warming. Farm animals like sheep and cattle produce methane gas, a greenhouse gas that contributes significantly to global warming. Meanwhile, the use of fertilizer and burning of waste release nitrous oxide to the atmosphere. Plants contribute greatly to control the amount of CO2 in the atmosphere because they absorb CO2 to convert into sugar and oxygen. As more trees and forests are burned down into farmland, more and more CO2 are accumulated in the atmosphere. Combining all those factors leads the greenhouse effect. When CO2, methane, and nitrous oxide gases accumulate in the atmosphere, and with the absence of plants to absorb CO2 due to deforestation, heat cannot escape from the Earth, which causes the rise in global temperature and seawater temperature. Moreover, ocean acidification is one of the main factors causing coral bleaching. It is caused by increasing concentration of atmospheric CO2 due to fossil fuel burning. As more CO2 accumulated in the atmosphere, oceans absorb more and more CO2, which then decrease pH level of seawater and making it more acidic. Once CO2 mixes with seawater, carbonic acid is made, which makes the ocean more acidic. Ocean acidification threatens the ability of coral to develop and recover from damage because coral rely on a specific pH balance. Ocean acidification can slow the growth of coral skeletons, which links to coral calcification, and makes reefs more brittle and less resistant to stressors like warming water temperatures.
Professor Hope Goldberg said that greenhouse gases are transferred to the ocean and 93% of the heat trapped is going to the ocean. If the ocean does not absorb this heat, the average surface temperature of the planet will be about 50 degrees Celsius. Seawater has been increasing since the 1980s. The first ever mass coral bleaching happened in 1998. The second one occurred nearly 12 years later in 2010, and in 2015 we are nearing the third mass coral bleaching, only 5 years after the second. The Australian Institute of Marine Science has identified a 50% loss on the Great Barrier Reef since 2016, with rising sea surface temperatures and coral bleaching episodes causing a decline in coral calcification, which is described as the process by which corals produce calcium carbonate. Coral calcification is an important determinant of the health of the reef because thousands of species depend on the calcareous coral skeleton. A Guardian article covering an Ames report mentioned that the surface reefs in the northern section, the worst hit by climate-induced marine heat waves, have lost about half their coral covers, with 81% severely bleached and only less than 1% that is not bleached. The central section sustained significant coral loss due to the coral bleaching and the continuous southward spread of the current wave of crown-of-thorns starfish outbreaks. Total coral cover decreased from 22% in 2016 to 14% in 2018, leaving 33% severely bleached and the other 10% not bleached. The southern sectors are still not severely affected by the recent bleaching event. Terry Hughes mentioned in his TED Talk that the importance of coral differs from country to country. For wealthy countries such as Australia and America, it is important because of its aesthetic and its high biodiversity. But for the less wealthy and developing countries, which are higher in number, these coral reefs are important for the security of the society's food and livelihood made from fishing and tourism. According to the Netflix documentary Chasing Coral, coral reefs are essential because it is a source of food and income for over 500 million people. Coral reefs are sometimes considered the medicine cabinets of the 21st century. Coral reef plants and animals are important sources of new medicines being developed to treat cancers, arthritis, asthma, Alzheimer's, heart disease, viruses, and any other diseases. Since coral are stationary animals, many have evolved chemical defenses to protect themselves from predators. Scientists continue to research the medical potential of these substances. In the future, coral reef ecosystems could represent an increasingly important source of medical treatments, nutritional supplements, cosmetics, pesticides, and other commercial products. As for the environment, coral reefs are important for many different reasons aside from supposedly containing the most diverse ecosystems on the planet. They protect coastlines from the damaging effects of wave action and tropical storm. They provide habitats and shelter for 25% of the marine organisms. The symbiodinium algae present in the corals turn the nitrogen gas into ammonium, which is useful for other marine organisms. Coral helps with nitrogen fixing. It is the chemical process by which atmospheric nitrogen is assimilated into organic compounds, especially by certain microorganisms as part of the nitrogen cycle. Several studies have revealed that nitrogen fixation activity in coral strongly depends on environmental conditions, as elevated temperature and dissolved organic carbon availability might increase nitrogen fixation in coral. These two stress factors are also strong drivers of coral bleaching. An increase in nitrogen fixation can result to algae blooming because they consume this high amount of nitrogen. Blooms might injure other marine organisms because they produce toxins that decreases the amount of oxygen in the water.
Shinichi went to a coral lab in Australia to find out more about the dying of corals. Eye on the Reef is a reef monitoring and assessment program of the corals that enables anyone who visits the Great Barrier Reef to contribute to its long-term protection by collecting information about reef health, marine animals, and incidents. Scientists have found some ways to save corals, but are still at the preliminary stages.
A mutation of corals named supercorals is discovered by scientists in the Kimberley region of northwest Australia, where the world's longest tropical tides create superheated tide pools where coral have found ways to adapt and survive. In addition, by training regular coral to better recover from bleaching by exposing it to non-fatal bleaching events, the supercoral and the trained coral is then transplanted back into the sea in the hope it will genetically transfer its learned resistance to its offspring. The COP21 Paris Agreement is an agreement with 196 signatory countries of the United Nations Framework Convention of Climate Change. These countries agreed on a framework for negotiating globally binding limits on greenhouse gas emission and temperature. The result is limiting warming to under 2 degrees, a limit after which dangerous and irreversible in the next 50 to 100 years, and climate change becomes inevitable. Even if the 2 degrees Celsius target of the Paris Agreement is achieved, due to the difference of land versus sea temperature, this projected level of warming will still have severe consequences for corals, particularly when temperatures spike above the long-term summer maxima, leading to recurrent bleaching events. Although we might not see the long-term effects, but it's still the first step to save corals. Here are some strategies for coral reef conservation to maintain or rebuild biological and structural integrity of coral reefs to secure the sustained delivery of ecosystem services to people. Hotels can raise general awareness and understanding of coral reef ecosystem, as the decline in coral reefs is viewed as having little, if any, significance for the vast majority of people. Explanation of how they are an important component of our everyday lives is a critical element of coral reef protection. Hotels can also develop images and information that can be printed out in guest guides. Hotels can give out natural sunscreen without oxybenzone, which are toxic to corals. Hotels should make contracts with qualified divers that are knowledgeable of protecting and conserving corals. Therefore, it could increase guest awareness and the importance of saving corals. There are hotels that are doing strategies to save coral, such as Hilton Okinawa Chatham Resort, with coral transplant activity, allowing guests to learn about the corals, as well as take part in transplanting them into the reef. Chatham Fishery Association of Coral Protection will award the guests with certificate of participation. Banyan Tree Maldives engage with guests to visit the in-house lab and introduce them to the incredible natural environment in Maldives, giving them opportunities to learn through education talks. Similar to Hilton Okinawa Chatham Resort, Banyan Tree Maldives also teach them how to transplant corals. In addition, Banyan Tree Maldives Lab constructed 4 nurseries in Maldives, where coral fragments are grown on each nursery, attached to ropes at depth sufficient to avoid the warm surface water. From 2015 to 2017, up to 11,000 are transplanted to our house reef to assist natural recovery and maintain a healthy house reef for everyone to enjoy. Banyan Tree Marine Lab pledged to make Maldives as a UNESCO Biosphere Reserve, and in 2017, we collaborated with the Ministry of Environment and Energy and other government organizations, providing training and assistance monitoring coral reefs for the biosphere assessment. The hotels in the vicinity of the Great Barrier Reef should learn from these hotels to reduce the further decline of coral reefs. 60% of the Great Barrier Reef is dying, and 25% of marine life depends on it. This is a very pressing and serious issue that everyone should be aware of. It is important to save coral reefs, as they are an endangered ecosystem and subject to multiple natural, man-made, and man-mediated stresses, and most sensitive ecosystem to global climate change in the world. We will need to alleviate the effect of global warming and climate change as they result in the rising sea temperature. We would like to end our video with a quote. "It is not too late for coral reefs. Indeed, for many other ecosystems that are facing challenges from climate change, it is still possible to reduce the rate at which the climate is changing, and that's within our power today." This video is proudly presented by
Yukina Hosen,
Choi Yan Yu Yuki,
Leung Yok Yu Ivy.
and Nisi Abraham.